Alexander Volkanovski is a master at baiting his opponent in subtle but highly effective ways. Throughout his career, he switched stances and punished foes for stepping into the pocket without making the proper adjustments. It's led him to the featherweight title with wins over Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes, Max Holloway, Korean Zombie, Brian Ortega, and most recently, Yair Rodriguez, not to mention an all-time classic with Islam Makhachev. In all of these fights, Volkanovski used the stance switch to lead him to much success. Today, I want to break down a few aspects of Alexander Volkanovski's footwork and how he sets traps on the feet, making him such a dangerous striker. We will look at how he switches by stepping back to fake his opponent into thinking he is retreating, how he switches quickly to get power off of different shots and why that works, as well as how he uses switching from Southpaw to Orthodox in a defensive manner. First things first, let's hear it from Alexander Volkanovski himself.
I like to pick up on habits. If people start doing the same thing, obviously I'm going to capitalize that and make it pay. One thing that I like to do off kicks, I switch stances, especially for my lead kick. I'll throw the lead kick and then I'll get back out of range because it's very easy for me to get out of range, throw hooks and stuff like that. Watch him. Yeah, switch your stances. All right. Again. Boom. Yeah, switch your stances. All right. I've got to read. Yeah, I've read that he switches stances all the time. And again, what I like to do about it, I get to hit that leg and get my head off center as well. Boom. Yeah.
Defensive footwork is the foundation of smart fighting. Alexander Volkanovski utilizes the switch of stances in just this way. Perpetually the sure fighter, despite a long reach, puts Volkanovski at a disadvantage. Having to punch up the majority of the time really takes much of Volkanovski's reach away from him. So countering for Volkanovski relies on power, speed, or distance management. Alongside hand fighting, the footwork is a critical part of this. The illusion of giving ground is the basis of stance switching with Alexander Volkanovski. To give an illustration of retreat, one has to actually give ground. This is perfectly illustrated when Volkanovski did so against the Korean Zombie. We can see here Volkanovski starts by 1. Shifting his lead foot from Orthodox backwards to a Southpaw stance. He then repeats the process mirrored by stepping back with his now lead right foot into Orthodox again. This motion is the foundation of all of Alexander Volkanovski countering from the stance switch. Being comfortable and able to go between Southpaw and Orthodox fluidly allows him to change where the power shots come from, where the jabs come from, and what his opponent can expect to land in terms of their own offense. When Volkanovski gets comfortable with his opponent's range and speed, he starts to let them get a little bit closer, which allows them to strike. Again, we go to the Korean Zombie. The Korean Zombie is known to come forward at all costs. To negate the distance issue, Volkanovski, who is in Southpaw, will step back with his right foot into Orthodox, expecting a cross from Zombie to follow up from a thrown jab. Doing this creates more space. Notice in the second frame here that Volkanovski now allows Zombie to get in and fill out the distance as he retreats. The additional space will allow Volkanovski to stay in retreat, counter, or simply give him more reaction time. Volkanovski is also not particular in what he likes to switch and pivot on. We saw an example of this, of him getting out of the way of the push kick against Yair Rodriguez at UFC 290. When Rodriguez comes forward, he likes to push kick his opponent's back and get them to the fence to ensure they cannot retreat to the rear any longer. In our section here, Volkanovski starts out in Southpaw, Rodriguez starts his throw of the push kick, and Volkanovski switches to Orthodox. Switching allows Volkanovski to swing his rear foot out and around the outstretched kicking leg of Rodriguez. He hasn't put this together yet, but there are some opportunities to strike from this position. We see some of the best work from this in the Thai boxing legend Superleg. Alexander Volkanovski likes to build off of the stance switch and has a variety of different method of attacks that he uses based off of what stance he is in and what stance his opponent is in. Defense is nice and everything, but the unified rule set of MMA calls for effective damage as the best way to win a fight. Alexander Volkanovski is about as effective as a fighter as we've ever seen in the UFC's featherweight division. That in itself is saying something. Champions that have topped the division include Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, and Max Holloway, 3 of the best offensive fighters of all time. But when Volkanovski is on, he is hellacious. With his long reach, he will switch stances and will know the range instantly. This was displayed perfectly against Yair Rodriguez in the 3rd round. This time we start our exchange off with Volkanovski in Orthodox and Rodriguez in Southpaw. To land the right and close the distance, Volkanovski hops into Southpaw quickly. This brings his right hand from the power hand at the back to the lead hand, which opens up the lead hook. Due to the fast nature of the switch, Rodriguez is still defending his right side as the lead hand from Volkanovski. This means the right hand is high and looking for the lead hook, and the left hand is looking for the cross. Because of this, the fast switch from Volkanovski and the failure to recognize that from Rodriguez's part allows Alexander Volkanovski to lead the right hook in clean. To understand why the switch works, we must first understand the basics of the guard. In Edwin Hazlitt's Boxing, an essential manual for boxing fundamentals released in 1940, we can read the basic counters for both the cross and the lead hook. Hazlitt states that the lead hook should be blocked and with the forearm by bringing your forearm up or by turning your body in and raising your right hand, similar to the forearm block. For cross, a fighter can extend their arm up and out to gain the inside position, turn and take the punch on the shoulder, or against the overhand right, drop the body and back away. These 2 defenses are the opposite to each other and expose your defense on the opposite punch. No offensive attack is without counter, and vice versa for defense. Switching stances and attacking before your opponent can comprehend that defense should now be opposite and different. You can exploit this hole in his defense and land some heavy blows. Off of this, Volkanovski will also walk his opponents onto these lead hooks instead of leading the charge. Built off the step back previously touched on against Korean Zombie, Volkanovski will shift stances backwards and his opponent will follow to stay in range. But that's exactly what Volkanovski is looking to counter. Just before the ground and pound, Volkanovski used this stepping back into Southpaw to drop Yair Rodriguez. To start out, Volkanovski is in Orthodox and will poke at Rodriguez with the inside kick, one of his go-tos. He will bring his foot up and kick the inside of Rodriguez's lead leg. As the kick lands, Rodriguez thinks the appropriate counter to a low kick, which is the cross. This is the same counter Dustin Poirier knocked out Justin Gaethje with in their first fight. But Volkanovski will counter this by stepping back with that lead foot into Orthodox, creating just a bit more space. Rodriguez has committed to exchanging and follows up on the missed cross with a roundhouse. This puts Rodriguez on one leg and forces him to drop his left arm to balance as he's throwing the kick. Volkanovski, now in Southpaw, lands a right lead hook clean and drops Rodriguez. The natural action of the rear low kick almost always causes the opposite hand to reach down out to counterbalance. The animation here shows Jose Aldo landing said kick, and even he, as great of a kicker as he is, lowers his hand. It's not always necessary to lower your hand, but that's an exception, and the majority of low kicks require this balance. Against mirrored stance, Orthodox versus Southpaw, the rear kick opens up with the cross. The lead hook isn't the usual counter. With Volkanovski stepping back, the lead hook opens up and Rodriguez drops his hand on the kick. While he does like to go backwards to get range, Alexander Volkanovski is not scared to go forward and press the attack. Even in unintuitive fights like Islam Makhachev, Volkanovski will switch to close the distance and land big blows. Makhachev is a fighter you don't want to come forward on and throw wild. Makhachev will duck under and get you to the ground where he will be hell to pay. Volkanovski approaches this differently. With Makhachev being more comfortable and traditional with his hands than his predecessor, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Volkanovski, who is the orthodox fighter, can reach out and control the lead hand of Makhachev. He will dip low as to throw a cross and instead comes up with a lead right hook on the step through. Similar to the Rodriguez hook, except this time he's coming forward. Now in Southpaw, blading the stances, Volkanovski throws a left cross instead of a right cross out of Orthodox. The step through was enough to cross Makhachev and get him out of position while he's bundled up on his stance and dropped Volkanovski. Putting it all together, we will move over to Alexander Volkanovski's win over Brian Ortega, perhaps his best overall performance. Alexander Volkanovski has put on some masterclass performances, and while many would point Makhachev or one of the Max Holloway fights as his quintessential performance, I think it comes from UFC 266 against Brian Ortega. The particular moment I want to look at in Volkanovski and Ortega's fight is in that epic third round at about 3 minutes in. Volkanovski chains together all of the techniques we've discussed together, and it is beautiful. We start out in Southpaw versus Orthodox, with Volkanovski being the Orthodox fighter. To get into the pocket, Volkanovski steps forward and dips as if to throw a big right hand. Ortega lifts up and brings up his guard. Instead of throwing, Volkanovski will slide his rear foot up, which will open up that low kick. This is a unique setup for the low kick that we didn't see in the Rodriguez example earlier, but this is where Volkanovski sets up all of his work from. The entry is only the entry. It's the exit that we're actually concerned with. The step up outside kick lands. Remember what Volkanovski said at the beginning of our reading.
One thing that I like to do off kicks, I switch stances, especially for my lead kick.
He does just that, as Ortega throws the quote-unquote proper counter across just like Rodriguez. The step back provides Volkanovski with a counter. This time Volkanovski has to slip to the inside of Ortega's cross. But that lead right hook is now available, and Volkanovski has switched to Southpaw. Gassed, Ortega stumbles forward and into Orthodox himself off the momentum of the throw, though I don't think this was intentional. In a danger spot, Ortega has the outside foot position, so Volkanovski is forced to step over his leg, which is deep in on him. In doing so, Alexander Volkanovski puts his right leg to the rear and he's returned to Orthodox. At the end of the day, Alexander Volkanovski may be the most complete fighter we've ever seen in the sport of mixed martial arts. He's incredibly tricky standing up, he can wrestle, he's incredible with ground and pound. This guide is only one small aspect of what makes Alexander so great. It's impossible to know how much more he has left at this moment in time. He's given us 14 fights in the UFC, and someday we can comb through the footage and look back at how much Alexander Volkanovski will have changed the sport for the better. He will go down as an all-time great because he is Alexander the Great. Hey, thanks to everybody for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please drop a sub, drop a review, drop a comment, do everything because it helps the channel out so much. And if you want these directly to your inbox, please get at me on Substack, fightlibrary.substack.com. That's where I post articles and videos all about the beautiful art of fighting and how it goes down. So again, guys, thank you very much, and I'll catch y'all next time in 2 weeks. Later.